Some days, the good Lord gives you just enough time to do what needs doing, and not a second more. That's what Sergeant Jack Reynolds kept telling himself as the police SUV bounced violently down the muddy service road cutting through Everglades National Park. His weathered hands gripped the dashboard, knuckles white against sun-spotted skin. At 60 years old, with retirement papers tucked in his breast pocket, he'd seen just about everything in his 35 years of service, but the radio call that had come through 10 minutes ago had made his blood run cold. K-9 officer down, possible python attack, Junction 14 near Sawgrass Loop. It wasn't just any K-9 officer. It was Luna, his Luna. The German shepherd who'd been by his side for 9 years, who'd taken a bullet for him during that bank robbery in 2018, who visited his wife in hospice every day until cancer took her 3 years ago. The dog who was supposed to retire alongside him in exactly 14 days.
"Step on it. Andrews," Reynolds growled to the young officer behind the wheel. "That snake won't wait on us to arrive." Officer Michaela Andrews pushed the accelerator harder, the mud spraying behind them as they skidded around another bend. The summer heat pressed against the windows like a physical force, the humidity thick enough to chew even with the AC blasting. Reynolds checked his watch. They were still 4 minutes out. "Sergeant, I've got visual confirmation," the radio crackled. "It's definitely Luna. Python looks to be 15, maybe 16 feet. She's in bad shape, sir." Reynolds snatched the radio. "Is she breathing? Don't you dare tell me she's gone." "Taylor?" "Still breathing, but that snake's wrapped around her middle. Each time she exhales, it tightens. Dr. Carter estimates we've got maybe 3 minutes before the next constriction crushes her ribs completely." 3 minutes. Reynolds felt sweat trickle down his spine that had nothing to do with the Florida heat. In his mind's eye, he could see Luna, her intelligent brown eyes, the gray starting to frost her muzzle, the scar above her left shoulder where that bullet had torn through. "What about Max?" Reynolds asked, thinking of the other German shepherd on the force, Luna's mate both professionally and otherwise. "Is he on scene?" "Officer Tanner arrived with Max 2 minutes ago," came the reply. That's actually part of the problem, sir. Max is going ballistic. Won't let anyone near Luna. We can't get close enough to help her with him guarding like that." The vehicle swerved sharply as Andrews took a corner too fast, nearly sending them into a ditch. Reynolds didn't even flinch. "Any sign of what Luna was doing out there?" he asked. "It wasn't her patrol zone today. She should have been back at the station with him, going through the retirement paperwork." "Negative. But, sir, there's something else you should know." The hesitation in Taylor's voice made Reynolds' stomach drop. "Spit it out, son." "We found tracks. Human tracks. This wasn't just Luna wandering off. Someone led her here." The implication hung in the air like the sulfurous swamp gas rising from the marshes around them. Someone had deliberately put Luna in harm's way. The thought made Reynolds' blood boil, a rage he hadn't felt since the night he'd found his wife collapsed on the bathroom floor. Cancer finally winning its brutal war. They crested a small rise, and suddenly Reynolds could see the cluster of police vehicles ahead, lights flashing silently against the backdrop of sawgrass and cypress trees. Beyond them, a circle of officers stood at a distance from what looked like a terrible sculpture, the massive coiled form of a Burmese python wrapped around the unmistakable shape of a German shepherd. "Stop here," Reynolds commanded as they were still 30 yards out. "That snake sees another vehicle coming at speed. It might panic and finish the job." Andrews slammed on the brakes,
and Reynolds was out before the vehicle had fully stopped, his old knees protesting as he hit the ground running. Chief Barbara Wilson intercepted him at the perimeter, her face grave beneath her wide-brimmed hat. "Jack, you need to prepare yourself. It's bad." Reynolds pushed past her without a word, his focus narrowing to the scene before him. Luna lay on her side in a small clearing, her tan and black coat dusty and matted with blood from several small wounds. Around her midsection, like some nightmarish belt, was wrapped the thick, muscular body of the python, its scales glinting with an almost metallic sheen under the merciless Florida sun. Luna's sides heaved with shallow, labored breaths. Each time she exhaled, Reynolds could see the python's muscles flex, tightening incrementally. And there was Max, the younger German shepherd, circling the scene with hackles raised, a continuous low growl emanating from deep in his chest. His handler, Officer Ethan Tanner, stood nearby, calling commands that Max was clearly ignoring for the first time in his career. Reynolds approached slowly, his hand outstretched. "Max," he called softly. "Stand down, boy." The dog's head swiveled toward him, amber eyes wild with a mixture of fury and desperation. For a moment, Reynolds thought Max might charge him, but then recognition flickered in those eyes. The growling subsided slightly. "That's right," Reynolds continued, inching closer. "You know me. I'm here to help her. We all are." Dr. Melissa Carter, the department's veterinarian, appeared at his side, medical kit in hand. "We've got maybe 2 minutes. Jack, that snake's going to tighten again, and when it does—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Reynolds looked at the massive reptile, at Luna's fading strength, at the circle of officers unsure how to proceed without risking both dogs and themselves. His hand unconsciously moved to touch the retirement papers in his pocket. "Some days," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else, "the good Lord gives you just enough time." Then, louder, to the assembled team, "We've got one shot at this. Here's what we're going to do. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story." The circle of officers parted as Reynolds approached the nightmarish scene. Luna's eyes, those intelligent, loyal eyes that had looked to him for guidance for nearly a decade, found his. Despite her agony, her tail thumped weakly against the ground in recognition. That simple gesture nearly broke Reynolds' heart. "Easy, girl," he whispered, crouching just beyond the reach of the massive python. "I'm here now." Up close, Luna's condition was even worse than he'd feared. The python's thick body, easily as wide as Reynolds' thigh, was wrapped twice around her midsection, the pressure visibly constricting her ribcage. Small trickles of blood seeped from where the snake's scales had abraded her skin. Her once proud German shepherd frame looked suddenly fragile, her 9 years weighing heavily as she struggled for each breath. Max continued his agitated pacing, muscles rippling beneath his glossy black and tan coat. Unlike Luna's graying muzzle, Max was in his prime at 7 years old, powerful, alert, and right now absolutely terrified for his mate. His handler, Officer Ethan Tanner, maintained a white-knuckled grip on his leash. "He's never disobeyed a command before," Tanner explained. The young officer's face flushed with exertion. "I can't get him to stand down. It's like he's possessed." Reynolds nodded without taking his eyes off Luna. That's not disobedience. Son, that's devotion. Chief Barbara Wilson stepped beside Reynolds, her usual commanding presence subdued by the gravity of the situation. In her 20-year career, she'd never lost a K-9 officer on her watch. And Reynolds could see in her eyes she wasn't about to start today. Department protocol says we should call in Florida Wildlife Conservation, she said quietly. This is a protected area, even for invasive species. Reynolds felt his hands begin to shake, not from age, but from a fury he could barely contain. With all due respect, Chief, I don't give a damn about protocol right now. That's not just any dog that's Luna. His voice broke slightly on her name. She's taken down armed suspects, found missing children, and saved my worthless hide more times than I can count. We're not waiting. The python shifted slightly, adjusting its deadly embrace. Luna whimpered, a sound so foreign coming from her that several officers physically winced. Doctor, Carter checked her watch and shook her head. We're running out of time, she warned. Each constriction is causing more damage. Another one could collapse her lungs completely. Reynolds surveyed the scene with the tactical eye of a veteran officer. The python was massive, easily 16 feet of pure muscle. Its triangular head remained vigilantly alert, tongue flicking to taste the air. Unblinking eyes reflecting nothing but ancient, cold instinct. This wasn't just any Burmese python. This was a monster even by invasive species standards. That beast could swallow a small deer whole, muttered Officer Andrews, voicing what everyone was thinking. Or a dog, added Tanner grimly. Reynolds ignored the commentary, focusing instead on the snake's positioning. Its muscular coils wrapped primarily around Luna's midsection, but its head remained mobile, a significant danger to anyone attempting a rescue. More concerning was how the tail end had anchored itself around a nearby cypress knee, giving the snake leverage to maintain its stranglehold. We need to work both ends simultaneously, Reynolds decided. Carter, what's the safest way to get her out without causing more injury? The veterinarian knelt, careful to keep her distance. Ideally, we'd need to unwind it starting from the head. But you'd need to immobilize that head first. It could strike at anyone who approaches. How long would Luna have if we shot the snake? Asked a rookie officer, hand hovering near his service weapon. Doctor. Carter shook her head emphatically. The snake's muscles would contract instantly if killed. It could crush her before we could unwrap it. Max suddenly lunged forward, nearly pulling the leash from Tanner's grasp. His bark was deep and authoritative, not his usual alert bark, but something more urgent, almost communicative. Reynolds had heard Luna make similar sounds when trying to direct handlers toward evidence or suspects. He's trying to tell us something, Reynolds said, studying the younger dog's behavior. The German shepherd strained toward Luna, then abruptly shifted his attention to a spot about 10 feet to their left, barking insistently. What is it? Boy. Tanner loosened the leash slightly, allowing Max to lead him a few steps in that direction. The grass there was flattened in an unusual pattern. Reynolds followed, his experienced eyes quickly spotting what Max had already detected, fresh boot prints, deep enough to suggest someone of considerable weight, and a strange dragging pattern beside them. Someone was here, Reynolds confirmed, crouching to examine the evidence. Recently, and they were dragging something heavy. Chief Wilson joined him, her expression darkening. You thinking what I'm thinking?
Reynolds nodded grimly. Someone brought that snake here deliberately. The implications settled heavily over the group. This wasn't a random encounter. Luna hadn't simply stumbled upon a python during routine patrol. This was intentional. "But why?" asked Andrews. The young officer's brow furrowed in confusion. Who would want to hurt Luna? Reynolds felt an old, familiar coldness settle in his gut, the same feeling he'd had during his years working narcotics, when he'd realized they'd stumbled onto something much bigger than a routine bust. Luna had made plenty of enemies over her career: drug dealers, smugglers, abusers she'd helped put away. The list of people with grudges against the department's most effective K-9 officer was distressingly long. A sudden movement caught Reynolds' attention. Luna's body tensed, a spasm of pain rippling through her as the python adjusted its grip. The clock was ticking down. "Speculation can wait," Reynolds declared, returning to Luna's side. "We need a plan, now." Dr. Carter had been preparing equipment from her medical bag, a large syringe, some kind of lubricant, and several pairs of thick protective gloves. "I have a mild sedative that might relax the snake enough to loosen its grip," she explained. "But someone would need to hold its head while I administer it." Reynolds immediately began rolling up his sleeves. "That'll be me." "Jack." "No," Chief Wilson objected. "You're 2 weeks from retirement. Let one of the younger officers—" "Which one of them has experience handling reptiles?" Reynolds challenged. When no one responded, he continued, "That's what I thought. I grew up wrestling gators before it was illegal. This is no different." It was a slight exaggeration. Reynolds had indeed grown up in the Everglades, but his experience with alligators was more about avoidance than wrestling. Still, no one needed to know that particular detail right now. Tanner suddenly cursed, drawing everyone's attention back to Luna. The python had begun its dreaded constriction cycle again, its muscles visibly tightening around Luna's ribs. The German shepherd's eyes bulged slightly, her breathing becoming even more labored. "We're out of time," Dr. Carter announced, her professional demeanor cracking. "It's now or never." Max let out a heart-wrenching howl. Sensing Luna's increased distress, the sound echoed across the clearing, a primal expression of fear and rage that raised goosebumps on Reynolds' arms. In that moment, looking between the two dogs, one fighting for her life, the other desperate to help, Reynolds made his decision. "Andrews, Tanner, you're with me on the head," he commanded. "Wilson, take 2 officers and work on the tail end where it's anchored. Carter, get that sedative ready. The rest of you form a perimeter if this thing gets loose. I don't want it disappearing into the brush." As the team moved into position, Reynolds noticed something unusual about Luna's collar, a small tear and what looked like strange markings that hadn't been there that morning. He made a mental note to examine it more closely once Luna was safe. "On my count," Reynolds said, pulling on the thick protective gloves Dr. Carter had provided. His heart hammered in his chest, hands steadier now that the moment for action had arrived. This was familiar territory, the calm that came with absolute focus, when everything beyond the immediate task faded away. He looked at Luna one more time, meeting her trusting gaze. "Hang on, old girl," he whispered. "We're getting you out of this." Then, to the assembled team, his voice rang with authority that belied his 60 years. 3, 2, One, now. The midday sun beat down on Reynolds as he prepared to confront the python. But his mind drifted back to a cooler day, 9 years earlier, when he'd first met Luna. The memory was as clear as if it had happened yesterday, the police academy training grounds in northern Florida. Rows of German Shepherd puppies lined up for selection day, and Reynolds standing there with doubt clouding his mind. "I'm too old to be starting with a new partner," he'd grumbled to Captain Harrison, who had dragged him there against his wishes. At 51. Reynolds had just lost his human partner of 12 years to retirement. Frank Delaney had been the brother Reynolds never had, and the thought of replacing him with anyone, let alone a dog, felt like betrayal. "The department's moving toward K-9 units for veteran officers," Harrison had explained for the 10th time. "Less physical strain, and you get to work mostly solo." "Thought that would appeal to your cranky old ass," Reynolds had scowled, scanning the line of German Shepherd puppies with their eager handlers. Most of the dogs were straining at their leashes, barking excitedly at the potential handlers walking past, all except one, a small female at the end of the row, sitting perfectly still, watching everything with intelligent eyes that seemed to evaluate each passing human. "That one," the trainer had said, following Reynolds' gaze. "That's Luna, 6 months old and already showing more focus than dogs twice her age. But I should warn you, she's particular about who she works with." Reynolds had approached cautiously, expecting the puppy to either cower or jump up like the others. Instead, Luna had remained seated, her eyes tracking his every movement. When he'd knelt down to her level, his knees protesting the whole way she had tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that felt almost human. "She's sizing you up," the trainer had commented with amusement. "Not much to size up these days," Reynolds had muttered, extending his hand, palm up in a peace offering. Luna had sniffed his fingers delicately, then done something that made the trainer gasp. She'd placed her paw directly on Reynolds' hand, as if sealing a contract. "Well, I'll be damned," the trainer had whispered. "In 15 years of training police dogs, I've never seen that before." Reynolds hadn't been impressed. "Probably just wants the treat in my pocket." "You don't have treats in your pocket, Sergeant." Reynolds had looked down at the puppy again, meeting those knowing eyes. There was something there, an old soul quality that resonated with his own world-weary outlook. Before he could stop himself, he'd asked, "Does she have a name yet? A real one? I mean, just her designation Luna. Means moon in Latin. She was born during a full moon, and the night staff said she didn't make a sound, just stared up at it through the window." Reynolds had nodded, something clicking into place. His late wife, Eleanor, had loved the moon, used to drag him outside on clear nights just to stare at it, claiming it looked different every time. The coincidence had felt significant somehow. "That dog's got more sense than half the force. I swear on my mother's grave," Reynolds had found himself saying. "She'll do." The memory shifted to their first major case together, 6 months later. A 5-year-old boy had wandered away from a family picnic near the Ocala National Forest. 3 days of searching had yielded nothing, and hope was fading as a storm system approached. Reynolds and Luna, still establishing their partnership, had been assigned to a sector already searched twice. "Waste of time," the incident commander had said. "But we need to show the family we're still looking,"
Reynolds had taken offense at the defeatism. "My dog hasn't searched it yet," he'd replied stiffly. Eleanor had still been alive then, fighting her first bout with cancer. That morning she'd squeezed his hand and said, "Jack, find that little boy. Bring him home to his mama." The quiet confidence in her voice had strengthened his resolve. Luna had been different that day, more focused, more determined. 4 hours into their search, with rain beginning to fall, she'd suddenly changed direction, pulling Reynolds into a dense thicket of palmettos that the previous search teams had skirted as too difficult to navigate. "Luna, what are you doing? We need to stick to the grid," Reynolds had complained, ducking under branches and cursing as thorns caught his uniform. Luna had ignored him completely the first and only time she'd ever disobeyed a direct command. She'd pulled harder, whining with an urgency that made Reynolds stop questioning and start following. 20 minutes later, they'd found the boy, huddled inside a hollow log, dehydrated and scared but very much alive. When they'd carried the child back to the command post, Eleanor had been waiting there, having driven out despite her weakness from chemotherapy. The look of pride on her face as she watched Luna receive pets and praise from the boy's tearful parents had been worth everything. "That dog," Eleanor had said on the drive home, reaching back to stroke Luna's head. "She's special, Jack. She's going to change your life." Reynolds hadn't known then just how right Eleanor would be over the next 3 years, as Eleanor's cancer advanced, retreated, and advanced again. Luna had become more than his partner on the force. She'd become the steady presence that kept him functioning during the worst moments, sleeping at Eleanor's feet during hospital stays, gently nudging Reynolds to eat when he forgot, placing her head on his lap during those long nights when sleep wouldn't come. The day after the funeral, Reynolds had found himself sitting on the back porch, a glass of whiskey in hand, contemplating how easy it would be to just keep drinking until the pain stopped. Luna had watched him from the doorway for a long moment, then disappeared into the house. She'd returned, dragging her leash, dropping it at his feet with a look that clearly said, "Enough of this. We have work to do." "You're a pushy one, aren't you?" Reynolds had grumbled. But he'd put down the glass and picked up the leash. They'd walked for miles that day, and the next, and the next. Slowly, Reynolds had found his way back to some semblance of life. Luna had saved him, as surely as she'd saved that little boy in the forest. A sharp bark from Max yanked Reynolds back to the present, to the python, the danger, and Luna fighting for her life. He blinked away the memories, refocusing on the tactical problem before him. "You with us, Sergeant?" Chief Wilson asked, concern evident in her voice. "Never left," Reynolds replied, flexing his gloved hands, just remembering something important. He looked at Luna, still struggling in the python's grip, and then at Max, who had finally calmed enough to follow Tanner's commands again, though his eyes never left his mate. Those two had their own history. Reynolds recalled. Max had come to the department 3 years after Luna, a problem dog that other handlers had given up on. Too aggressive. They'd said, too unpredictable. Reynolds had suggested pairing him with Luna for training exercises, and something remarkable had happened. The older, steady female had somehow communicated with the unruly male in ways the human handlers couldn't comprehend. Within weeks,
Max had become one of the most reliable K-9 officers on the force. "That young troublemaker," Reynolds had told Eleanor during one of her last lucid days in hospice. "Luna straightened him out good. They're quite the pair now." Eleanor, always perceptive, had smiled weakly. "Reminds me of someone else I know. Some old dog who needed the right partner to show him how to behave properly." Reynolds had pretended offense, but they both knew she was right. Before Eleanor, he'd been that same kind of trouble, quick-tempered and resistant to authority. She'd smoothed his rough edges just as Luna had done for Max. "Sergeant Reynolds." "Doctor?" Carter called urgently. "We need to move now. Luna's breathing is getting worse." Reynolds nodded sharply, pushing the memories aside. "Let's bring her home," he said, his voice steady with resolve. One more time, with tactical precision, Reynolds positioned his team around the python. Andrews and Tanner flanked him, their expressions grim but determined as they prepared to tackle the snake's head. Chief Wilson and 2 officers took up positions near the tail where it anchored around the cypress knee. Dr. Carter stood ready with the sedative syringe, while the remaining officers formed a perimeter, service weapons drawn as a last resort. "Remember," Reynolds instructed, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. "We need to immobilize the head first. Andrews, you'll grab just behind the jaw. Tanner, you secure the neck. I'll guide the head away from Luna so Carter can administer the sedative." "What if it strikes?" Andrews asked, sweat beading on her forehead. "Then I'll be damn sure to get in its way before it reaches any of you." Reynolds replied matter-of-factly. The younger officers exchanged glances. Recognizing the selflessness in his statement, Reynolds turned to Wilson. "Chief, on my signal, your team starts unwinding the tail end. Slow and steady, we need to maintain even pressure or it'll sense the weakness and constrict harder." Wilson nodded sharply. "Understood. I've been wrangling trouble since before you were in diapers. Barbara," Reynolds added with a hint of his old cockiness, using her first name despite protocol. "This is just another day at the office." The chief's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile under different circumstances. "Just remember, Jack, I've got my eye on that retirement party of yours. Don't you dare make me turn it into a memorial service." Reynolds grunted in acknowledgement, then focused on Luna. Her breathing had become alarmingly shallow. Each inhale a visible struggle against the python's crushing embrace. The urgency of the situation couldn't be clearer. "Now," he commanded. The team moved as one. Reynolds approached the python's head with slow, deliberate movements. The massive reptile watched him, its cold, unblinking eyes tracking his advance, forked tongue flicking rapidly to taste his scent on the air. Up close, the creature was even more intimidating, its triangular head nearly the size of a man's fist, powerful jaws capable of latching onto prey with backward curved teeth designed to never let go. Just as Reynolds came within striking distance, a commotion erupted from the sidelines. A tall, thin man in a Florida Wildlife Conservation uniform pushed through the perimeter of officers, his face flushed with indignation. "Stop! What you're doing is illegal," the man shouted, brandishing some kind of official-looking document. "This is a protected habitat, and that python must be captured intact for research purposes." The distraction was all it took. The python's muscles tensed, its head pulling back in the telltale preparation for a strike. Reynolds barely had time to shout a warning before the snake launched itself forward, not at him, but at Andrews.
who had frozen in surprise at the newcomer's interruption. Reynolds reacted instinctively. Throwing himself between Andrews and the striking snake, he felt the impact against his protective gloves as he managed to deflect the python's head away from its intended target. The force of the movement sent him stumbling, but Tanner was there, grabbing the snake just behind the head with his gloved hands. "Got it!" Tanner shouted, struggling to maintain his grip as the powerful reptile writhed in his grasp. Reynolds recovered quickly, adding his strength to Tanner's. Together, they controlled the python's head while Andrews, shaken but professional, secured its neck. "Now, Carter," Reynolds ordered. The veterinarian darted forward, plunging the syringe into the muscular section just behind the snake's head. The python's struggles intensified briefly, then gradually began to subside as the sedative took effect. "Wilson, start unwinding," Reynolds called, maintaining his grip on the increasingly docile snakehead. At the other end, the chief's team began the delicate process of unwrapping the python's tail from its anchor point. As they worked, Reynolds found himself face to face with the wildlife conservation officer who had nearly caused disaster. "What in God's name were you thinking?" Reynolds growled, not releasing his hold on the python. "You almost got my officer killed." The man adjusted his glasses nervously but stood his ground. "I'm Environmental Officer James Peterson. What you're doing violates at least 3 protection ordinances. That python is part of a tracking study on invasive species movements." Reynolds stared at the man in disbelief. "Does that tracking study include having it kill police dogs?" Peterson's expression shifted from righteous indignation to confusion. "What? No, of course not. We tag them and release them in controlled areas. This one shouldn't even be here. It's supposed to be 5 miles south in a contained research zone." A cold feeling settled in Reynolds's gut, one that had nothing to do with the massive snake in his hands. "Are you saying this particular python is part of your study? You can identify it?" Peterson nodded, pointing to a small colored tag barely visible among the scales near the snake's head. "Tag SRP-247. She's one of our largest females. Over 16 feet and nearly 140 pounds. We've been tracking her for 3 years. Reynolds exchanged meaningful glances with Chief Wilson, who had overheard the exchange. Someone had deliberately moved a tagged research python to this location right where Luna would find it. "We're making progress," called one of the officers working on the tail. The python's coils had begun to loosen slightly, creating just enough space for Luna to take deeper breaths. The German shepherd's eyes remained alert despite her ordeal, watching the proceedings with remarkable calm. As the team continued their careful unwinding of the massive snake, Reynolds noticed Max's behavior changing. The male German shepherd had stopped his agitated pacing and was now sitting at attention, eyes fixed not on Luna or the python, but on something in the distance. "Tanner," Reynolds said quietly, "your dog's alerting to something." Officer Tanner glanced at Max, immediately recognizing the posture. "He's detected someone, somewhere in that direction," he said, nodding toward a dense stand of saw palmetto about 50 yards away. Reynolds made a quick decision. "Take Andrews and check it out. Could be our snake handler." "But the python," Tanner began. "We've got it under control," Reynolds assured him, though the python was still very much a handful even with the sedative beginning to work. "If someone set this trap for Luna, I want them caught. Now." Tanner nodded sharply,
transferring his portion of the python's weight to another officer before he and Andrews moved off with Max leading the way. The dog's posture now alert and focused as he entered tracking mode, with the snake's head secured and its tail being unwound. Reynolds finally had a moment to examine Luna more closely. Despite her ordeal, her eyes remained clear and trusting. As their gazes met, Reynolds felt a familiar connection, the wordless communication they'd developed over 9 years of partnership. "Almost there, girl," he murmured. "Just hang on a little longer." As Dr. Carter monitored the snake's response to the sedative, Reynolds noticed something he'd missed before Luna's service vest was partially unzipped, something she couldn't have done herself. Carefully, while maintaining his grip on the python, he managed to peek inside the pocket of the vest with his free hand. What he found made his blood run cold, a small plastic bag containing white powder, professionally sealed, the kind of packaging used by drug traffickers. Someone had turned his canine partner into an unwitting drug mule. "Chief," Reynolds called, keeping his voice low, "we've got a bigger problem than a snake." Before he could elaborate, shouting erupted from the direction Tanner and Andrews had gone. Gunshots followed one, then two more in rapid succession. Max's bark turned into the distinctive bay he used when pursuing a suspect. Chief Wilson immediately dispatched 3 more officers toward the commotion, drawing her own weapon. "Secure that snake and get Luna free," she ordered the remaining team, "and somebody find out what the hell is happening over there." Reynolds found himself torn between completing Luna's rescue and responding to the apparent firefight. His instinct as a police officer pulled him toward the danger, but his commitment to his partner kept him firmly in place, hands still securing the deadly serpent that threatened her life. "Reynolds," Dr. Carter said urgently, "look at Luna's collar." Shifting his attention, Reynolds noticed what the veterinarian had spotted, a small electronic device attached to Luna's standard police collar, partially hidden by her fur. It wasn't department-issued equipment. "Someone's been tracking her," he realized aloud. "This wasn't random at all. Luna was targeted specifically." The implications were staggering. This wasn't just animal cruelty or an attack on a police dog. This was a coordinated effort to eliminate a specific K-9 officer. And there was only one reason someone would go to such lengths. Luna had discovered something she wasn't supposed to find. Another gunshot echoed from the palmetto thicket, followed by Tanner's voice shouting, "Police, stop!" The commotion seemed to agitate the python despite the sedative, its massive body tensing once more around Luna. Reynolds redoubled his grip on the snake's head, exchanging a worried glance with Dr. Carter. "We need to finish this now," he growled. "That sedative won't hold it forever." Chief Wilson nodded to the remaining officers. "2 of you, go back up Tanner and Andrews. The rest, stay focused on this snake, whatever's happening over there. Our priority is Luna." As the unwrapping process continued, Officer Tanner suddenly emerged from the brush at a dead run, his uniform torn and face scratched from the saw palmetto fronds. Max wasn't with him. "Sergeant," he called, his voice urgent, "we've got a serious problem." Reynolds didn't take his eyes off the python's head. "Where's Max and Andrews?" "Andrews is in pursuit with Max," Tanner explained, trying to catch his breath. "We found a man with a remote control device and some kind of specialized equipment. When we approached, he fired at us and ran." He hesitated, then added, "Sergeant, he was wearing a departmental maintenance uniform." A shocked silence fell over the group. The implication was clear. This wasn't just an external threat. Someone within their own ranks was involved. There's more, Tanner continued, his voice dropping. The guy said something before he ran. He said, "Tell Reynolds his dog should have stayed out of Warehouse 17. Reynolds felt as though he'd been punched in the gut. Warehouse 17 was an abandoned storage facility near the port that had been the focus of a joint DEA local police investigation 3 weeks ago, an operation that had mysteriously gone sideways when their informant disappeared. Luna had been part of that raid, and while they'd found nothing incriminating, she had shown unusual interest in a particular shipping container that had already been cleared by other officers. "Luna found something," Reynolds said, the pieces suddenly falling into place. "That's why they want her dead." Chief Wilson's expression hardened. "And they used department credentials to get to her." She activated her radio. "All units, be advised we have a potential infiltration situation. Suspect is wearing maintenance uniform, armed and dangerous. Last seen fleeing east from Junction 14, Andrews and K9 Max in pursuit." The python's coils had loosened enough that they could now see the full extent of Luna's injuries. Her breathing was improving, but Dr. Carter's expression remained grave as she examined the dog's ribcage. "Multiple contusions, possibly some cracked ribs," she reported. "We'll need to get her to the clinic as soon as she's free." And the wildlife officer, Peterson, had been silently observing, but now he stepped forward again. "I need to know how this snake got here," he insisted. "SRP-247 was secured in a research facility with multiple locks and security cameras. Seems like you've got your own internal problems to worry about," Reynolds replied tersely, still focused on the delicate task of controlling the snake's head. A sudden crackle of the radio interrupted them. "Chief Wilson," came Andrews' breathless voice. "Suspect is down. Repeat, suspect is down. Max has him cornered in a cypress grove about 200 yards east of your position, requesting backup and medical. Suspect has a bite wound from Max." Wilson acknowledged the call and dispatched the necessary support, then turned back to Reynolds. "Let's finish this. I want Luna free and safe before we deal with our dirty cop." With renewed determination, the team completed the unwrapping process. As the last coil was carefully lifted away, Luna remained motionless, clearly exhausted from her ordeal. Dr. Carter immediately began examining her, hands gently probing for injuries while she listened to the dog's breathing with a stethoscope. "Her lungs sound clear, which is a miracle," Carter announced. "But she's going to need X-rays to check for fractures. And she's severely dehydrated." Reynolds knelt beside his partner, running a gentle hand over her head. "You did good, girl," he murmured. "Real good." As the sedated python was secured in a special transport container under Peterson's supervision, Reynolds carefully removed the tracking device from Luna's collar, bagging it as evidence. The small package of white powder from her vest pocket had already been documented and secured, clear evidence that someone had attempted to use the K9 officer as an unwitting drug mule. Chief Wilson approached Reynolds as Luna was being prepared for transport to the veterinary clinic. "Jack, I need to know what happened at Warehouse 17, she said quietly. "Whatever Luna found, it was big enough that someone was willing to kill a police dog to cover it up." Reynolds hesitated, memories of that day flooding back. The raid had been standard procedure, a tip about a shipment of synthetic opioids coming through the port. Multiple agencies involved, everyone with their own agenda. Luna had cleared most of the warehouse without alerting, but At one particular shipping container, she had shown unusual behavior. Not her typical alert for drugs, but something different. She had sat down and whined, looking up at Reynolds with what he could only describe as confusion. "I think Luna found something that didn't make sense to her," Reynolds explained. "Not drugs. She has a specific alert for that. This was different. When the container was opened, it was empty except for some packing materials." The DEA team checked it and cleared it. He frowned, remembering his own doubts that day. "I should have trusted her instincts more. Whatever was there, someone removed it before the raid." Wilson's radio buzzed again. "Chief, we have the suspect in custody," came the report. "He's claiming he was paid to plant the snake and the drugs. Says he doesn't know anything else." "Bring him in," Wilson ordered, "and make sure he understands the penalties for attempting to kill a police officer, because that's exactly what Luna is." As the veterinary transport prepared to leave with Luna, Tanner returned with Max. The male German Shepherd was still on high alert, his posture rigid and professional after successfully apprehending the suspect. When he saw Luna being loaded into the vehicle, however, his demeanor changed instantly. He pulled toward her, whining with such distress that Tanner had to struggle to maintain control. "Let him see her," Reynolds suggested. "He needs to know she's alive." Tanner nodded and brought Max closer, keeping a firm grip on the leash. Max approached Luna cautiously, sniffing at her face and neck. Luna, despite her weakness, managed to lift her head slightly, touching her nose to his in a gesture of canine recognition that brought an unexpected lump to Reynolds' throat. "Those two have always been thick as thieves," Reynolds said softly, watching the interaction. "Even when they shouldn't be." As Max was gently pulled away so Luna could be transported, Dr. Carter approached Reynolds with an expression that suggested she was holding something back. "What is it?" Reynolds asked, immediately sensing her hesitation. "There's something else you should know," Carter said, her voice low enough that only Reynolds could hear. "When I was examining Luna, I detected something I wasn't expecting." She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "Luna is about 4 weeks pregnant." Reynolds stared at the veterinarian in shock. "Pregnant? But how she's never unsupervised during her cycles?" Carter glanced meaningfully at Max, who was watching the transport vehicle with unwavering attention. "Life finds a way. Sergeant, those two must have managed to get together during one of their training sessions." The realization hit Reynolds with unexpected force. Luna wasn't just fighting for her own life in the python's coils. She had been protecting her unborn puppies as well. Max's frantic behavior suddenly made perfect sense. Somehow, he had known what the humans had not. "Does this complicate her recovery?" Reynolds asked, concern evident in his voice. "It adds a layer of complexity," Carter admitted. "But German Shepherds are remarkably resilient. If we can get her through the next 24 hours, I believe both she and the puppies have a good chance." As the transport pulled away with Luna, Reynolds checked his watch. The entire ordeal had lasted less than 30 minutes, though it felt like hours. The ticking clock that had been counting down Luna's life had been reset, but Reynolds knew they weren't out of danger yet. "The clock's ticking faster now. Folks," he said to the remaining team, "someone in our department is working with drug traffickers, and they've already tried to kill Luna once. They won't stop there."
Chief Wilson nodded grimly. I'm putting Luna under 24-hour protection at the clinic. And Reynolds, she added, fixing him with a stern look. I know that retirement paperwork is burning a hole in your pocket, but I need you to hold off on submitting it. This case just became your last assignment. Reynolds nodded. His decision already made the moment he'd seen that tracking device on Luna's collar. Wasn't planning on going anywhere. Chief, not until whoever did this is behind bars. As they prepared to leave the scene, Max still straining to watch the departing transport vehicle. Reynolds felt a renewed sense of purpose. His last 2 weeks on the force had just become the most important of his career, not just for Luna and her unborn puppies, but for the integrity of the department he had served for 35 years. Come on, boy, he said to Max, taking the leash from Tanner. We've got work to do. The veterinary clinic's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Luna's still form as she lay on the examination table. Dr. Carter worked methodically, her experienced hands gentle but efficient, as she cleaned the abrasions left by the python's scales. 2 armed officers stood guard at the door, Chief Wilson taking no chances after the day's events. Reynolds watched from the corner, his weathered face etched with concern. Max sat beside him, unusually subdued, his amber eyes never leaving Luna. The normally energetic shepherd seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, maintaining a vigil as steadfast as any human partner would. She's stabilizing, Dr. Carter announced after completing her examination. 3 cracked ribs, substantial bruising, and moderate dehydration, but considering what she went through, it's remarkable there's not more damage. She lowered her voice, adding, The puppies appear to be unaffected, but we'll monitor closely. Reynolds nodded, relief washing over him. She's always been tough as nails, Doc. Tougher than most of the officers I've worked with. As Luna was moved to a recovery kennel, Reynolds' phone buzzed with a message from Chief Wilson. Suspect talking. Conference room in 20 minutes. I need to go, Reynolds told Dr. Carter. Department business. The veterinarian nodded. She's in good hands, Jack. And she won't be alone. She glanced meaningfully at Max, who had settled into a sphinx position facing Luna's kennel, clearly having no intention of moving. Take care of them, boy, Reynolds murmured to Max, receiving a solemn blink in response. As he left the clinic, Reynolds' mind replayed the events from 3 weeks ago, the Warehouse 17 raid that had somehow triggered this whole nightmare. The memory unfolded with crystal clarity, like a film reel in his mind's eye. It had been raining that night, a steady Florida downpour that turned the port area into a maze of puddles and slick surfaces. The Joint Task Force Local Police, DEA, and Customs had gathered in a staging area half a mile from the target. Luna had been unusually alert during the briefing, her posture rigid, sensing the tension among the human officers. Remember, we're looking for synthetic opioids, the DEA lead had said. Our informant says they're moving approximately 50 kilos through a shipping container marked for agricultural equipment. Reynolds had checked Luna's vest, making sure her protective gear was secure. Ready to work, girl? He'd asked quietly, receiving a soft whine of affirmation in response. The raid itself had gone textbook smooth, initially teams securing the perimeter, entry points covered, warehouse workers compliant and quickly contained. Luna had performed her usual methodical search, moving from container to container without alerting, until they'd reached container 217. Reynolds remembered it clearly the moment Luna's behavior had changed. Instead of her usual confident movement, she'd become hesitant, circling the container repeatedly before sitting down in front of it. Not her trained alert for narcotics, but something else, a behavior Reynolds had never seen before. "What is it, girl?" he'd asked, watching as Luna whined softly, looking between him and the container door with apparent confusion. When the container was finally opened, it had been empty except for some packing materials and wood pallets. The DEA team had checked it thoroughly and found nothing suspicious. "False alert," one of the DEA agents had commented dismissively. "Happens sometimes." But Reynolds had known better. In 9 years, Luna had never given a false alert. She'd found something that didn't match her training, something she didn't know how to communicate to her human partners. Later that night, after the unsuccessful raid had been concluded, Reynolds had taken Luna back to the station. She'd been unusually quiet during the drive, lying in the back of the K9 vehicle instead of sitting at attention as she normally did. "Don't worry about it, girl," he'd assured her. "I believe you. Whatever you found, it was real." The next day, Reynolds had tried to convince his superiors to let him return to the warehouse for another search, but the operation had been officially closed. 2 days later, their informant had been found dead, an apparent suicide, though Reynolds had his doubts. And now, 3 weeks later, someone had tried to kill Luna using a deliberately placed python and had planted drugs on her. The conference room was crowded when Reynolds arrived. Chief Wilson stood at the head of the table, her expression grim. Tanner was there, along with Andrews and several senior officers. A map of the port area was displayed on the screen, with Warehouse 17 highlighted. "Sergeant Reynolds, glad you could join us," Wilson said. "How's Luna?" "Stable," Reynolds replied, taking a seat. "What did our snake handler have to say?" Wilson nodded to Detective Martinez, who opened a file folder. "Suspect is Roger Whitley, 32, employed by the department as a maintenance worker for the past 8 months. Claims he was paid $10,000 to plant the python and attach a tracking device to Luna's collar. Says he was approached by a man he'd never met before at a bar near the port." "He's lying," Reynolds said flatly. "No random stranger approaches someone about killing a police dog without prior connection. And how would this mystery man know Whitley had access to the K9 unit?" "Exactly," Wilson agreed. "We're running his financials and phone records now, but here's where it gets interesting." She nodded to Andrews, who took over. "The tracking device on Luna's collar is military grade." Andrews explained. "Not something you'd pick up at a local spy shop. And the drugs planted in her vest weren't just any drugs. They're an exact chemical match to the synthetic opioids we've been trying to intercept at the port." Reynolds leaned forward. "Someone's sending a message. They're telling us they can get to our dogs. Plant evidence and make it look like we're the dirty ones." Wilson nodded. "And it goes higher than a maintenance worker. We've got a leak, possibly multiple leaks, in the department or one of the federal agencies we work with." The implications hung heavy in the air. If drug traffickers had infiltrated law enforcement to this degree, no officer was truly safe, especially not the K9 units that couldn't be bribed or threatened into silence. "I want to go back to Warehouse 17, Reynolds said. "Whatever Luna found 3 weeks ago, it's the key to all this." Wilson shook her head. "The warehouse has been cleared out since the raid. Whatever was there is long gone. Maybe not everything, Reynolds insisted. Luna was confused by what she found. It wasn't drugs, she has a specific alert for that. It was something else, something that didn't fit her training parameters. He paused, an idea forming. I need access to all the evidence collected from that raid, including the packing materials from Container 217. Wilson considered this, then nodded. Tanner, go with him to the evidence locker. Andrews, continue working with digital forensics on that tracking device. The rest of you, review every case involving Warehouse 17 for the past year. Someone connected to our department is working with drug traffickers, and I want them found yesterday. As the meeting dispersed, Reynolds' phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Carter. Luna, awake, asking for you in her own way. Reynolds showed the message to Tanner. Evidence locker will have to wait. I need to see my partner first. I'll drive you, Tanner offered, his expression sympathetic. I'd want to check on Max, too, if our situations were reversed. The drive back to the veterinary clinic was tense with unspoken concerns. As they approached the building, Tanner finally broke the silence. Sergeant, there's something I need to tell you, he said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. About Max and Luna. Reynolds turned to him, sensing the younger officer's discomfort. If it's about Luna being pregnant, Carter already told me. Tanner shook his head. It's not just that. 3 weeks ago, the day after the Warehouse 17 raid, I took Max back there on my own time. He swallowed hard. Luna's behavior had been bothering me, and Max had been acting strangely too, like he could sense something was wrong with her, so I thought maybe Max could find whatever Luna had detected. Reynolds stared at him, a mixture of anger and interest battling for dominance. You conducted an unauthorized search of an active crime scene without informing your superior officers. Yes, sir, Tanner admitted. I know it was against protocol, but Max found a small fiber optic cable hidden in one of the wooden pallets from Container 217. I collected it as evidence. But before I could report it officially, I was told by Lieutenant Dawson that the case was closed and all evidence collection had to cease. Reynolds felt his pulse quicken. Lieutenant Dawson was the department's liaison with the DEA for port operations, a 20-year veteran with an impeccable record. Did you keep the evidence? Reynolds asked urgently. Tanner nodded. Tanner, it's in my personal locker at the station. I didn't know who to trust after Dawson shut me down, so I just held on to it. Reynolds processed this information quickly. If Dawson was involved, the corruption went even higher than they'd suspected. Does anyone else know about this? Have you told Wilson? No, sir, Tanner replied. Just you. And I didn't make the connection to Luna's attack until today. They arrived at the clinic, the conversation momentarily suspended as they focused on security. The two officers guarding the entrance nodded respectfully as Reynolds and Tanner entered. Inside, they found Dr. Carter checking Luna's vital signs while Max lay pressed against the side of her kennel, as close as he could get while still respecting the medical equipment. She's doing remarkably well, Carter reported. Her vitals are strong, and she's even managed to take some water and a little food. Reynolds approached the kennel, kneeling to Luna's level. The German shepherd's eyes brightened at the sight of him, her tail offering a weak thump against the bedding. Despite the IV line and monitoring equipment, she tried to rise. Easy, girl, Reynolds soothed, reaching through the kennel bars to gently stroke her head. You just rest now. We're going to get the people who did this to you. Luna whined softly, a sound Reynolds had heard countless times over their years together, her way of communicating concern. Even now,
injured and pregnant, her focus wasn't on herself, but on her partner. "She's worried about you," Tanner observed from behind him. "Even after everything she's been through." Reynolds felt a lump form in his throat. "That's Luna for you, always putting everyone else first." He turned back to the dog. "Don't you worry about me, old girl. You just focus on getting better and taking care of those puppies." At the mention of puppies, Max's ears perked up, his attention shifting between Luna and Reynolds as if following the conversation. Reynolds couldn't help but smile at the male dog's evident concern and pride. "You've got a lot to answer for, mister," he told Max with mock sternness. "But I suppose if Luna chose you, you must be doing something right." As Reynolds stood to confer with Dr. Carter about Luna's continued care, his phone rang. Chief Wilson's number flashed on the screen. "Reynolds?" he answered. Wilson's voice was tight with urgency. "Jack, Whitley's dead. Found hanging in his cell 20 minutes ago. The preliminary check suggests it wasn't suicide." She paused. "And Lieutenant Dawson has gone missing. His wife says he got a call an hour ago and left immediately. His cruiser was just found abandoned near the port." Reynolds exchanged a meaningful glance with Tanner. "We're on our way back. And, Chief, we may have evidence connecting Dawson directly to Warehouse 17. As they prepared to leave, Reynolds took one last look at Luna. "I'll be back soon," he promised. "And next time, we'll have answers." The evidence locker smelled of dust and forgotten cases, a repository of crime scene fragments, each tagged and catalogued with bureaucratic precision. Reynolds and Tanner worked methodically, pulling the boxes from the Warehouse 17 raid while two trusted officers stood guard outside. Chief Wilson had limited knowledge of the fiber optic cable to just the four of them, unwilling to risk the information reaching whoever had orchestrated the attack on Luna. "Here," Tanner said, carefully removing a small evidence bag from inside his uniform jacket. "I kept it separate from everything else." Reynolds examined the thin cable through the plastic no more than 4 inches long, with specialized connectors at each end. It looked innocuous enough, but its presence in a supposedly empty shipping container raised troubling questions. "This isn't standard for shipping containers," Reynolds observed. "It's high-grade communications equipment." Tanner nodded. "Max found it embedded in one of the wooden pallets. If I hadn't been specifically looking for something unusual, I would have missed it completely." Reynolds turned the bag over in his hands, a theory forming. What if Container 217 wasn't meant to transport drugs at all? What if it was a communications hub, a mobile command center disguised as ordinary cargo? The implications were disturbing. Such technology would allow traffickers to coordinate shipments across multiple vessels while appearing to be nothing more than standard shipping equipment. More troubling was what it suggested about their department leak. Whoever had authorized the raid had ensured the container would be empty before they arrived. "We need to find Lieutenant Dawson," Reynolds said grimly. "And we need to determine who else might be involved." His phone buzzed with a text from Chief Wilson. "Port security camera footage recovered. Dawson's vehicle entered Port Authority gates 45 minutes ago. No sign of exit. Tactical team assembling now." Reynolds showed the message to Tanner. "They're moving fast. We need to get to the port." As they hurried to join the tactical team, Reynolds found his thoughts drifting to Luna, lying wounded in the veterinary clinic. The image of her struggling in the python's grip flashed unbidden before his eyes, followed by a much older memory, Luna taking a bullet meant for him during a drug bust gone wrong 3 years earlier. It had been a routine warrant service that escalated without warning. The suspect,
a mid-level dealer named Marcus Reeves, had seemed compliant initially, opening the door to his apartment with apparent resignation. Reynolds had been explaining the warrant when Reeves suddenly produced a handgun from behind his back. Luna had reacted before Reynolds could even process the threat, launching herself at Reeves with a ferocity Reynolds had never witnessed from his normally controlled partner. The gun had discharged twice, once into the ceiling and once into Luna's shoulder as she took Reeves down. The hours that followed remained a blur in Reynolds' memory, the frantic drive to the emergency veterinary hospital, Luna's blood soaking through towels pressed against her wound, the agonizing wait during surgery. Reynolds had stayed for 36 hours straight, refusing to leave until Luna opened her eyes. When she finally regained consciousness, her first action had been to try to stand, as if reporting for duty despite her injury. Reynolds had gently restrained her, his voice breaking as he told her, "Not this time, girl. You've done enough. You've done more than enough." The bullet had missed vital organs but caused significant muscle and tissue damage. The veterinarians had warned that Luna might never return to full duty. But 3 months later, after rigorous physical therapy during which Reynolds had taken leave to personally oversee her recovery, Luna had passed her recertification tests with flying colors. "She's a fighter," the canine training supervisor had commented with admiration. "Most dogs wouldn't come back from an injury like that, at least not with the same drive. But she seems even more determined now." Reynolds had understood why. Like many officers who'd faced death in the line of duty, Luna had emerged with a renewed sense of purpose. She'd saved her partner's life and had been given a second chance at her own. She wasn't about to waste it. The tactical briefing was already underway when Reynolds and Tanner arrived at the Port Authority Command Center. Chief Wilson stood before a digital map of the port, highlighting areas being searched by tactical teams. "Dawson's cruiser was found here." She indicated a point near the administrative offices. "Security cameras show him entering this warehouse 10 minutes later, accompanied by 2 unidentified men." Reynolds studied the map, a cold realization dawning. "That's Warehouse 19, 2 buildings down from our original raid location." Wilson nodded grimly. "Exactly. And according to port records, it's currently leased to a company called Agritech Solutions, the same company that was listed as the owner of the empty container Luna alerted on 3 weeks ago." Reynolds shared a meaningful glance with Tanner. The connection was undeniable. "What's the tactical approach?" Reynolds asked, professional instincts taking over. 3 entry points," Wilson replied, highlighting them on the map. "Team Alpha will take the main loading dock, Team Bravo the side entrance, and Team Charlie the office entrance. We've got thermal imaging showing approximately 7 individuals inside, one of whom we believe is Dawson, based on body size and movement patterns." Reynolds nodded, his mind already working through the scenario. What about Mac's a K9 unit could be invaluable for this operation? Wilson hesitated. "Are you sure? After what happened to Luna? Max was specifically trained for tactical entries." Tanner interjected. "And he's already familiar with Dawson's scent. He could locate him faster than we could, potentially preventing casualties on either side." After a moment's consideration, Wilson nodded. "All right. Tanner, gear up Max and join Team Bravo. Reynolds, you'll coordinate from the command center with me." Reynolds started to protest, but Wilson cut him off. "That's an order, Sergeant." "You're too personally involved, and you're 2 weeks from retirement. I'm not risking you on this entry." As the tactical teams prepared, donning body armor and checking weapons,
Reynolds pulled Tanner aside. "Max is a good dog, but he's not Luna. Don't expect him to show the same restraint if things get heated." Tanner nodded, understanding the warning. "I'll keep him tight on the lead until we locate Dawson." Reynolds watched as Max was fitted with his tactical vest, the German Shepherd's demeanor transforming from concerned mate to focused police dog. His ears stood at attention, his posture alert and ready. Whatever conflicting emotions he might have felt about Luna's condition had been temporarily set aside, his working drive taking precedence. "Good boy," Reynolds murmured, giving Max a brief pat as he passed. "Find Dawson and come back safe." As the tactical teams departed, Reynolds joined Chief Wilson in the command center, where live feeds from officer body cameras were being monitored. The tension in the room was palpable as the teams took their positions around Warehouse 19. "All teams in position," came the report over the radio. "Awaiting execute order." Wilson looked to Reynolds. A silent acknowledgement of his experience despite her earlier order keeping him from the field. He gave a short nod. "Execute," Wilson commanded. On the monitors, the synchronized breach unfolded with practiced precision. Flashbang grenades momentarily disrupted the video feeds, their disorienting effect giving the entry teams crucial seconds of advantage. When the cameras stabilized, they showed the organized chaos of a tactical entry officers moving in formation, securing doorways, identifying and detaining suspects. "Movement in the northwest corner," one of the technicians called, highlighting a thermal signature on a separate screen. "Single individual, moving away from the entry teams." Reynolds leaned forward, studying the pattern of movement. "That's Dawson. He's trying to reach the secondary exit." On one of the body camera feeds, Tanner and Max appeared, moving purposefully through the warehouse. Tanner directed Max toward the fleeing thermal signature, giving the command to track. Max responded immediately, pulling forward on his lead with determination. The feed from Tanner's camera bounced as he followed Max through the warehouse, past stacked crates and pallets similar to those they'd found in Container 217. As they rounded a corner, a figure came into view, Lieutenant Dawson, attempting to open a secured door. "Police freeze!" Tanner shouted. Maintaining his grip on Max's lead, Dawson turned, his face contorted with a mixture of panic and resignation. More disturbing was the object in his hand, not a weapon, but a remote detonator. "Stay back!" Dawson shouted, his finger hovering over the trigger. "I'll bring this whole place down." Reynolds felt his blood run cold. The warehouse likely contained more than just communications equipment. The threat of explosion suggested explosives, possibly disguised as ordinary cargo. On screen, Max strained against his lead, recognizing Dawson but sensing the danger he posed. The German Shepherd's training conflicted with his instincts. He knew Dawson as a fellow officer, but could clearly sense the man's hostile intent. "Lieutenant, think about what you're doing," Tanner said, his voice remarkably steady despite the dire situation. "Whatever they've got on you, we can help. Just put down the detonator." Dawson's laugh was hollow, edged with desperation. "You have no idea what you're involved in. This goes higher than you could possibly imagine." His gaze fixed on Max. "They already tried to send a message with Luna. Maybe they need a clearer one." The implication was unmistakable. Dawson was acknowledging his role in the attack on Luna. Reynolds watched in horror as the lieutenant's finger tightened on the detonator,
What happened next unfolded in seconds. Max, sensing the imminent threat, suddenly lunged forward with such force that the lead slipped from Tanner's grasp. The German shepherd launched himself at Dawson, not in an attack, but in a tactical takedown maneuver, his body hitting Dawson's arm rather than his torso, knocking the detonator from his hand before it could be triggered. The lieutenant fell backward, Max maintaining a controlled hold on his arm without delivering a full bite. Tanner rushed forward, securing the detonator and calling for backup as he handcuffed the fallen officer. In the command center, Reynolds released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "That dog," he murmured with grudging admiration, "is almost as good as his partner." Wilson squeezed his shoulder, relief evident in her expression. "Let's go see what Dawson has to say for himself." Lieutenant Gregory Dawson sat in the interrogation room, his once crisp uniform now rumpled and stained, his usually confident demeanor replaced by a haunted expression. The veteran officer's wrists were cuffed to the table, his department badge and service weapon conspicuously absent. Through the one-way glass, Reynolds watched as Chief Wilson circled the table like a predator, sizing up wounded prey. 23 years on the force, Wilson said, her voice carrying clearly through the monitoring speakers. A decorated officer, 2 commendations for bravery, and you threw it all away? For what? Greg money. Dawson's gaze remained fixed on the table. "You don't understand," he muttered. "None of you understand what you're dealing with." Reynolds felt a cold anger building in his chest. This man, someone he had worked alongside for over a decade, someone he had trusted with his life on multiple operations, had orchestrated the attempt on Luna's life, had used a python as a murder weapon against a police dog who had served the department faithfully for 9 years. "I need to talk to him," Reynolds told the monitoring officer. "Chief said to wait." "I wasn't asking permission," Reynolds interrupted, already moving toward the interrogation room door. Wilson looked up in surprise as Reynolds entered, but something in his expression must have conveyed his determination. After a brief hesitation, she nodded and stepped back, yielding the floor to the senior K-9 officer. Reynolds took the seat across from Dawson, saying nothing for a long moment. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken accusations. Finally, Dawson raised his eyes to meet Reynolds' gaze. "How's the dog?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Her name is Luna," Reynolds replied coldly, "and she's going to survive along with her unborn puppies. No thanks to you." A flicker of surprise crossed Dawson's face at the mention of puppies, but he quickly masked it. "I never wanted the dogs hurt," he said. "That wasn't my call." "But you went along with it," Reynolds countered. "You helped them plant a goddamn python. Greg to kill my partner." He leaned forward, hands flat on the table. "I want to know why." Dawson's composure cracked slightly. "They have my daughter, Jack, my Sophie. They've had her for 6 months. His voice broke. "They took her from her college campus. No ransom demands. No communication, just a photo of her every month to prove she's still alive. And instructions about which operations to compromise." Reynolds exchanged a glance with Wilson, whose stern expression had softened slightly at this revelation. They both knew Dawson's daughter, a bright, ambitious girl who had supposedly taken a study abroad program in Europe. The department had even thrown her a going-away party. "Who has her?" Reynolds asked, his tone marginally less hostile. "They call themselves the Syndicate." Dawson replied. It's an international network, drugs, weapons, human trafficking. They've been using the port as a transfer point for years, bribing officials, eliminating threats. He swallowed hard. When your dog alerted on that container 3 weeks ago, they panicked. It wasn't supposed to be part of the raid. It was their communications hub, controlling shipments all along the eastern seaboard. And they told you to get rid of Luna, Reynolds concluded. Dawson nodded miserably. They said if I didn't, Sophie would suffer an accident. I tried to do it in a way that wouldn't be traced back to the department, using Whitley as the fall guy, making it look like an animal attack. I never thought. He trailed off. Never thought what? Reynolds pressed. That Luna might survive, that we'd connect it back to you. That she was pregnant, Dawson whispered. Jesus, Jack, I'm not a monster. I was trying to save my daughter. Reynolds stood abruptly, turning away to control his anger. Part of him, the father who had lost his own daughter to cancer 10 years ago, understood Dawson's desperation. But another part, the partner who had watched Luna struggle for breath in that python's grip, couldn't forgive the betrayal. Where's Sophie now? Wilson asked, stepping back into the conversation. I don't know exactly, Dawson admitted, but I have coordinates for dead drops. And I know they're moving her soon. That's what the explosives in the warehouse were for. They're clearing out all evidence before a major shipment arrives next week. Wilson pulled out her phone, already typing commands to her tactical team. I want those coordinates, Greg, and every name you have. If your information helps us find Sophie and shut down this operation, it will be noted in your sentencing. As Dawson began providing details, Reynolds stepped out of the interrogation room, his mind racing. The revelation that Dawson had been coerced rather than corrupted didn't lessen Luna's suffering, but it changed the nature of their investigation. This wasn't just about a dirty cop. It was about an organized criminal enterprise with enough power to infiltrate law enforcement and enough reach to abduct and hold a college student for 6 months without detection. His phone vibrated with a text from Dr. Carter. Luna asking for dinner. Good sign. Max still standing guard. Reynolds smiled, despite himself. Relief temporarily displacing his anger. Luna's appetite returning was indeed a positive development. And Max's continued vigilance spoke volumes about the male shepherd's devotion, a quality Reynolds had perhaps underestimated. When Wilson emerged from the interrogation room 30 minutes later, her expression was grim but determined. We've got 3 potential locations where they might be holding Sophie, she informed Reynolds. Tactical teams are prepping now. I want in, Reynolds stated. Not as a request, but as a declaration. Wilson studied him for a moment. You're emotionally involved, Jack, and 2 weeks from retirement. That's precisely why I should be there. Reynolds interrupted. I've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. Besides, he added with a humorless smile, I'd like to personally meet the people who thought using a python on my dog was an acceptable tactic. After a moment's consideration, Wilson nodded. Fine. But you're with the command team, not entry. And Jack, she added as he turned to leave, we're bringing Max. We need a K-9 officer who can track Sophie if we find evidence of her presence. Reynolds hesitated, thinking of Luna alone at the veterinary clinic. I'll need to check with Carter first. Luna shouldn't be left unguarded. Already arranged, Wilson assured him. 2 officers outside, 2 inside, and I've called in Officer Martinez with Bella as additional K-9 support. Luna will be the most protected patient in that clinic's history. Preparations moved quickly after that. Within an hour, Reynolds found himself in a tactical briefing room, reviewing floor plans of an abandoned paper mill 30 miles outside the city, the location Dawson had identified as the most likely holding site for his daughter. "The mill has 3 main buildings," the tactical commander explained, indicating each on the projected map. "The administrative offices, the main production floor, and a warehouse section. Based on Dawson's information, they're likely holding Sophie in the administrative section, which has several rooms that could serve as secure holding cells." As the team discussed entry points and contingency plans, Reynolds found his thoughts returning to Luna. The image of her struggling in the python's coils had been replaced by a newer, more hopeful one, Luna recovering, surrounded by her future puppies. If all went well tonight, the people responsible for her ordeal would be facing justice, and Reynolds could focus on ensuring her safe recovery. Max sat alert beside Tanner during the briefing, his attention fixed on the tactical commander as if understanding every word. Reynolds noticed the dog occasionally glancing toward the door, as if expecting Luna to join them at any moment. The male shepherd's devotion was both touching and painful to witness, a reminder of the partnership that had nearly been destroyed by human corruption. "We move in 90 minutes, the commander concluded. "Get geared up and ready for transport." As the room cleared, Tanner approached Reynolds with Max at his side. "Sergeant," he began hesitantly, "I know you're worried about Luna, but I want you to know Max won't let you down tonight. He's not just doing this for the department or for me. He's doing it for her." Reynolds looked down at the German shepherd. Seeing the determination in his posture for the first time, he allowed himself to truly see Max not as Luna's impulsive mate or as a younger, less experienced canine officer, but as a dedicated partner in his own right, one who had proven his worth during Dawson's apprehension. "I know he won't," Reynolds acknowledged, briefly resting his hand on Max's head. "Luna chose well." As they prepared to depart, Reynolds received one more text from Dr. Carter, this one including a photo of Luna lying in her kennel, looking alertly at the camera. Despite her bandages and the monitoring equipment, there was a distinct spark in her eyes, the resilience that had defined her throughout their partnership. "She's fighting hard," the message read. "Told her you're bringing the bad guys to justice." Pretty sure she understood. Reynolds studied the photo, drawing strength from Luna's evident determination. "That dog," he murmured to himself, "is tougher than all of us put together." With renewed resolve, he joined the tactical team loading into the transport vehicles. Tonight, they would attempt to rescue Sophie Dawson and dismantle the organization that had nearly taken Luna from him. And if Reynolds had any say in the matter, the people responsible would learn exactly what happened when they targeted a canine officer under his protection. 3 months had passed since the night they'd raided the abandoned paper mill. 3 months since Max had tracked Sophie Dawson's scent to a locked office in the administrative section, leading to the rescue of the lieutenant's daughter and the arrest of 7 members of the syndicate. 3 months of investigations, arrests, and the gradual dismantling of a criminal enterprise that had infiltrated ports all along the eastern seaboard. And now, on a warm Florida morning, Sergeant Jack Reynolds sat on the front porch of his modest lakeside home, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Beside him, Luna lounged contentedly, her body still showing signs of her ordeal, a new scar along her rib cage, a slight hesitation when she climbed stairs but otherwise fully recovered. At her feet, a litter of 5 German shepherd puppies tumbled and played,
their clumsy movements bringing a smile to Reynolds' weathered face. "Look at them go," he murmured, sipping his coffee.
Got their mama's smarts and their daddy's energy. God help whoever gets assigned as their handlers."
Luna's tail thumped against the porch boards in apparent agreement, her intelligent eyes tracking the puppy's antics with maternal vigilance. At 8 weeks old, they were already showing distinct personalities, the bold one who always led explorations, the thoughtful one who studied situations before acting, the social one who constantly sought attention from both humans and fellow puppies. The sound of tires on gravel announced a visitor. Luna's ears perked up, but she remained relaxed, recognizing the familiar engine. Moments later, Officer Ethan Tanner's patrol car pulled into the driveway, Max's distinctive silhouette visible in the back seat. "Right on time," Reynolds noted, checking his watch. This had become their Sunday routine in the week since Reynolds' retirement had officially begun, Tanner bringing Max for a visit while they discussed the ongoing case developments over coffee. As Tanner released Max from the vehicle, the male shepherd bounded up the porch steps with barely contained excitement. He paused respectfully to greet Reynolds before turning his attention to Luna, gently nuzzling her neck before being swarmed by his offspring. Reynolds never ceased to be amazed by the transformation in Max around his family. The same dog who fearlessly tackled armed suspects became remarkably gentle with the puppies, allowing them to climb over him and tug at his ears without complaint. "Morning, Sergeant," Tanner called, climbing the steps with a folder tucked under his arm. "Or should I say civilian now?" Reynolds snorted. 35 years of sergeant doesn't wear off in 3 months. "Son, have a seat. Coffee's hot." Tanner settled into the adjoining rocking chair, accepting the offered mug. "Got the final report on the syndicate case," he said, placing the folder on the small table between them. "Thought you'd want to see it, even though you're officially off the clock." Reynolds nodded appreciatively. Though retired, he had remained unofficially involved in the case, his experience and insights proving valuable as the department untangled the complex web of criminal connections. Chief Wilson had been smart enough not to fully cut him out of the loop, knowing his personal stake in seeing justice done for Luna. "What's the final tally?" Reynolds asked, opening the folder. 23 arrests across 4 states, Tanner reported, including 3 corrupt port officials and a customs agent. The DEA has credited us with disrupting approximately 60% of the synthetic opioid traffic into the Southeast. Reynolds whistled low. "Not bad for a case that started with a confused dog and an empty shipping container." "Not just any dog," Tanner corrected, nodding toward Luna. "The best canine officer in the department's history, according to the commendation Chief Wilson submitted." Reynolds felt a surge of pride at that. Luna's actions had not only exposed a major criminal operation, but had also saved countless lives by preventing those drugs from reaching the streets. Even in what should have been her final weeks before retirement, she had remained true to her calling. "And Dawson?" Reynolds asked, his tone more somber. The lieutenant's betrayal still stung, though understanding the circumstances had softened some of his anger. 10 years with possibility of parole after 5, Tanner said. The DA took his cooperation and his daughter's situation into consideration. Sophie's doing better still in therapy, but she's planning to return to college next semester. Reynolds nodded, finding the sentence fair. Dawson had made terrible choices, but he'd been a father trying to save his child, something Reynolds could understand all too well. Having lost his own daughter years ago, some nights, he still wondered what he might have done in Dawson's position.
And what about these troublemakers? Tanner asked, smiling as one of the puppies attempted to climb his pant leg. Have you decided which ones are joining the K9 program? All of them, Reynolds confirmed. Chief Wilson approved it last week. They'll start basic training at 4 months, then specialized training based on their aptitudes. He reached down to stroke Luna's head. Their mama is going to help with the early stages. Seems fitting she should train the next generation. Luna had officially retired alongside Reynolds, but the department had arranged for her to participate in the training program, a role that would keep her engaged while respecting her physical limitations after the python attack. Max, meanwhile, had been promoted to lead K9 officer. His actions during the warehouse raid and the rescue of Sophie Dawson earning him departmental recognition. You know, Tanner said, watching Max playfully shepherd one of the puppies back toward the group. I used to think Max was just a hothead with good training, but these past few months, seeing him with Luna and the puppies, dealing with the case, he's shown a depth I never expected. Reynolds smiled, remembering his own similar journey with Luna. These dogs, he said thoughtfully, they've got more heart than most people I've met wearing a badge, more loyalty, more courage. He sipped his coffee, gazing out over the lake. Luna took a bullet for me once. Did I ever tell you that story? Tanner settled back in his chair. No, sir. I'd like to hear it, if you're willing to share. As Reynolds recounted the story of Luna's bravery during the drug bust gone wrong, he found the memories no longer carried the same sharp edge of fear. Time and perspective had transformed them into something else, a testament to the extraordinary bond between handler and K9 partner. The morning stretched on pleasantly, the conversation flowing from case details to departmental gossip to Tanner's recent promotion to K9 unit supervisor. Throughout it all, Luna remained at Reynolds' feet, occasionally rising to check on her puppies but always returning to her place beside her longtime partner. When Tanner eventually prepared to leave, promising to return the following Sunday, Reynolds walked him to his car, Max trotting alongside them after a reluctant farewell to Luna and the puppies. You know, Reynolds said as Tanner opened the car door for Max, sometimes the good Lord puts an angel in a furry coat just to remind us what loyalty really means. Tanner smiled, recognizing one of Reynolds's characteristic homespun philosophies. I believe you're right about that, Sergeant. After they departed, Reynolds returned to the porch, settling back into his chair. Luna climbed up with some effort to lie beside him, her head resting on his lap in a familiar gesture that spanned their 9 years together. We did good, girl, he murmured, stroking her graying muzzle. Real good. The puppies had finally exhausted themselves, piling together in a heap of fur on the porch floor. Reynolds watched them sleep, these living legacies of 2 extraordinary dogs, and felt a profound sense of continuity. Though he and Luna had reached the end of their official service, their impact would continue through these new lives, these future protectors and partners who would carry forward their spirit of dedication. You know, he told Luna quietly, retirement ain't so bad when you've got the right company. Luna's tail thumped once in agreement, her eyes drifting closed in contentment. Behind them, the lake sparkled in the morning sun, and before them stretched days unencumbered by schedules and emergencies, days they had earned through years of faithful service. Reynolds looked out over his property, at the peaceful scene before him, and knew with absolute certainty that even after 35 years of police work, The greatest privilege of his career had been the partnership with the extraordinary dog now resting at his side, a partnership that had weathered bullets and criminals and, most recently, the deadly coils of a python. "Thank you," he whispered to Luna, words meant for her alone, for everything. In the warm Florida sunshine, surrounded by new life and old loyalty, Jack Reynolds found himself looking forward to tomorrow for the first time in years, a tomorrow that, thanks to an extraordinary German shepherd and her equally remarkable mate, promised to be filled with purpose and companionship for many years to come. When life's autumn arrives, we understand what truly matters, like Sergeant Reynolds. Many of us have weathered storms, lost loved ones, faced retirement's uncertainty, and questioned our purpose when careers wind down. But his story reminds us that loyalty never retires. Luna and Max show us that even when bodies grow older and scars accumulate, the heart's capacity for devotion only deepens with time. Remember how Reynolds said, "Sometimes the good Lord puts an angel in a furry coat just to remind us what loyalty really means." That's a truth many of us recognize, whether it's a faithful pet, a spouse of 40 years, or friends who've stood beside us through life's hurricanes. The python that threatened Luna represents all the unexpected challenges that ambush us in our golden years: health scares, family troubles, loss of independence. Yet Reynolds teaches us that with courage and the right companions, we can overcome these trials and find new purpose. As those puppies played at his feet, we're reminded that our legacy continues through those we've mentored, loved, and protected. Even in retirement, our story isn't finished. It's just entering its most meaningful chapter.